Everyone, welcome back. Sorry it's been a few weeks. I'm going to try to put out more regular content moving forward. Really put my heart and soul into this. I'm not sure if this is going to be part of this channel or a separate side channel, but I really do think we need to take the time to connect the dots. And on top of connecting the dots, really translate what's going on. Not that we don't know, but I think it's important that we take time to connect with one another, especially if the topics that we're talking about resonate. It's not solving the world's problems per se, but we live in an increasingly divided America, an increasingly divided world where we have difficulty agreeing on things. And I'm not sure why that is. We all essentially want the same thing. We want affordability. We want to not feel like we're being, as consumers, being taxed into the ground, or to have resources to live our lives, right? And that's not asking much. This is asking for pure basic, fulfilling pure basic needs. So I wrote some notes on my phone here. I think predominantly the thing that's affecting us the most right now is this lack of connection. And I've discussed this before, how all of these technologies that we have on the internet, inherently between the algorithm and AI, have really muddied the waters. I think back to 2005 when Google had transitioned the algorithm, the search algorithm, where we used to be able to perform a Google search and receive the same results as someone else. Whereas today, based on our viewing habits, we're not seeing the same thing. And then of course with AI, the inherent problem with that is, what is the purpose of deepfakes? Why are people designing this technology other than for nefarious reasons? While people might think it's cute, it's actually very harmful and very damaging. And this is the reason why, while AI can solve a lot of our problems, it's also creating a slew of new problems each and every day. I'm not sure if you heard about it, but if they get a hold of your voice, just even a 5-second clip, they can actually emulate your voice. So it's pretty scary stuff out there. Now, that being said, really a solution to this, in addition to the job economy, the reason why we're having so much difficulty with jobs is due to the nature of the way that these systems are designed, especially now that AIs exists. All candidates are essentially looking the same. They're appearing the same to employers. Whereas before, you would have to have the writing chops and you'd have to have the skill. And unfortunately, I think we live in a world where lying is rewarded, unfortunately. And I'm sure people get away with it to a degree. And especially now that AI exists, like for whatever deficits exist, people can, fake it till you make it kind of thing. Which, listen, I don't disagree with the whole philosophy of fake it till you make it, especially if you're not a person that's entitled. You're not the kind of person that genuinely feels that, you're entitled. So anyways, kind of lost my train of thought there. But anyways, what I was also going to say is that, we're caught in a culture of groupthink. Groupthink got us where we're at, and unfortunately, we've never dealt with this much dishonesty before. I just think back to the way things were 20, 30 years ago. A person could totally write a bad check to someone and get away with it. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, that we, made a system where, they can check funds and account it immediately. But there used to be kind of an honor system, to the whole system and world in which we live, societally. And today it's like the opposite. It's the whole like philosophy of, innocent before proven guilty rather than guilty before proven innocent sort of thing. And of course, we already live in a very, an age fraught with so much disinformation and disingenuous behavior that's often rewarded, that to people that are chosen ones, thought leaders, people that genuinely care deeply about this world, we find great difficulty dealing with it. I think the fundamental difference, I'll just say, not to get too much into politics, but at least on this video, the fundamental difference is there's one group that believes everyone has rights, and then there's another group that doesn't. And not only do they not think people are entitled to equal rights, but they actually attack people and intimidate people into complying with their philosophies, which is emotional terrorism. Let's just call it what it is. It's emotional terrorism. And that's not talked about nearly enough, or labeled as such nearly enough. So anyways, the bottom line is, kind of my philosophy, and, I'll probably do this with a side channel, but I think it's important that, we don't get caught up in all the minutia of the moment. And when I say that, what I mean to say is that we're constantly being flooded with extraneous information all the time, and no one's really connecting the dots. No one's really translating what, say, for instance, the president is saying into terms that connect to the past and really show the choreography, that is associated with these actions and priming thoughts and priming ideas and, the soft release of things, so to speak, before the hard release, the hard realities that hit us. We're going to be caught in a perpetual war now due to the ego of an individual person that's never willing to admit that he's ever made a mistake in his life, to a group that is never going to admit that their leader is a faulty, adult, fallible person. And I don't know why that's so hard for them. I don't know why the truth hurts them so much that they're going to, jump into their individual silos and continue to support this kind of behavior. They don't understand how dangerous all of this truly is. And, if we don't take the time to talk about it, I know it's painful to talk about, but if we don't take the time to expose it and talk about it and really, bring the core themes back home to really connect the dots on where, what's happened to where we are at the present moment and where this is going, we're going to get blindsided when it comes to the midterms. We just simply are. What I'm trying to encourage on this channel, and I'm not trying to make it too political. Like I said, I may make a side channel, but we have our part to do with sharing our voices. I know, for us, we're all dealing with, and to varying degrees, the 5 stages of grief. And the first step, if I'm not mistaken, is shock, right? And, acceptance and change comes way later. And since the topics are constantly changing and there's so much hand waviness, and we want to get caught up in the semantics rather than simply being like, hey, what's the intent? What's the intent? Why are people doing what they're doing? It really, truly tells the story. And I don't see anyone really doing that, And I also don't see someone really translating, for instance, the president's words into what he's really saying. We have, unfortunately, he was successful in fabricating and socially engineering a fake news media. It took a decade for it to happen, but it's happened. And, the Republicans are in control of all the levers of government right now. They've taken control over the news media, and we're all effectively being gaslit. So if you feel something that there's deeply wrong inside you, and you feel like, you're not that you're crazy, but, everything going on that's swirling around in the world is making you feel crazy, just know that you're not alone. You're not alone. And I know it can make it feel also like, your voice, your narrative, what you have to say doesn't matter because it's not going to change anything. But we have to be careful with believing that, because there's the bystander effect, right? The bystander effect believes that, the person that's, getting robbed in the alleyway is going to be okay or whatever. We need to be willing to intervene more on these conversations and these social injustices if we ever, ever, ever hope to achieve better. We need to demand and expect better. So I know that's hard. I'm for myself, don't think I'd ever dream of being a politician as much as I think I would be good at it. Because it's just a constant onslaught out there. It's unrelenting right now. All the lies, the deceit, the betrayal, and quite frankly, the treasonous behavior that people are engaging in, all for money. People are so willing to sell their souls for a nickel, and watching out for themselves. We're currently in a time in history where we need to be reaching out to one another, developing coalitions and think tanks and thought groups about how our collective voice truly would make all the difference in this world right now. There's way more of us than there are of the people that are in power. If we all could unify on global strike, help take care of one another, and back one another, of course, in legal ways. That's all the more important right now. I know that so many of us are just so sick and tired of being sick and tired of all this. And, the thing I'm afraid of is, given all the stuff that's currently in the works with these midterms, from, these bombastic, threats or attacks on polling places, to what they've already done with seizing ballots, to what Louis DeJoy, him being installed as the Postmaster General, to, how all that slows down mail now, let alone, the president thinking that he can just seize any ballots that he wants, to them, requiring all this proof to be able to vote. And people that have had different last name changes due to marriages are also not going to be able to vote. That people are not aware or awake to all of the, barriers here. We also have the media. We already know that, when the results come in, they're going to, scream waste, fraud, abuse, and how this is not fair. And, there's the gerrymandering. I mean, they're hitting literally on every freaking cylinder. Just like Steve Bannon says, it's about flooding the zone. And as humans, we were never designed to engage in that way. I'm just going to call for what it is. What's going on right now is extremely demonic. We have white Christian nationals that believe that they're enacting the justice of God in their hand, while being entirely the most hypocritical people of all, not at all acting in the ways of Jesus. And then you also have some people out there, politicians, including the president, that never read a single word in the Bible, doesn't believe he needs to be saved, never going to admit once in his life that he's wrong, and a group of people that support that. I'm sorry, but that's an abusive relationship. We're all stuck in this abusive relationship. We're all stuck in this car. If the United States was a van or a bus, we're all stuck on this bus with an absolutely batshit crazy president. And like I said, we need to do our part to use our voices to come together, to unify our voices together. There's power in numbers, and no single person has to do all the work. We can help support one another to enact the changes that are necessary for this to not further devolve more than it already has. The affordability crisis is truly a problem, and the price gouging and the fact that we live, unfortunately, in a world that supports monopolies and doesn't do enough justice in terms of the abuse of these companies. Just look at what happened with DoorDash, with Trump's little stunt, that was entirely engineered. DoorDash grandma, like she's really walking around with a DoorDash grandma. You have to look at the psyop nature of what's going on here. And this person has been in other positions before. They've flown her around the country using her like this. So they want to accuse the left of, bussing in people. I think what they do is it goes back to what was said all the way at the beginning with this administration and Trump. Every accusation is a form of self-admission. And everything that happened with Iran was truly bad enough, truly bad enough that he actually brought up the Epstein files again. Can you freaking believe that? Anyways, so enough is enough. I just want you to know that you're valuable, you're loved. Try to spend more time in the present moment, not the past or the future. Take time to pray. Take time to show the courage to reach out to others and to love. Put that out there like a gift without expectation. And I think in some instances, you'll be surprised. So many of us are so homesick for feeling purpose and connection, and to help drive our future towards a more positive direction. Like I said, there's a good chunk of us that are still massively in doubt and disbelief with all that's happening and how illegal it is, that we just don't know what to do or how to start. I want to be able to help connect us and bring us together so we can use our unified voice in a much more effective and powerful way. And last but not least, do not rely solely on what you see out there with legacy media. They've been hijacked. I don't want to say they solely cannot be trusted, but there's very few out there. I think The Atlantic is one of the few. I do see some stuff on MSNBC that still has some, truth to it. But I think even CNN got bought out by Republican interest. And don't even get me started with Fox News. Fox News is a straight up disinformation machine, and it should be dismantled. While I believe in freedom of speech, I think speech that's abusive, that it is inherently misleading and leads to damage and harm, should not be free speech. For the same reason, you should not be able to yell the word "biom" on a plane. That's abusing your speech. That's abusing your right, and that matters. Because that's the analogy I would use right now. Is you've got someone that's acting in that way and not receiving any accountability, any justice, or any consequences for that. There are serious, serious consequences for us as a society if we allow this to continue. So as people, we have to demand better. If we can't get it through the government, we have to demand it ourselves. So peace and love to you all. Until next time, see ya. Be well.